Awesome. Well, we're so excited you guys are here. So nice to hear your bios and accomplished people. I feel really great to be up here. So getting to know you guys a little bit more, could you share on how you're connected to STEM entrepreneurship, which is the reason why we're here today, either like individually or through
Yeah, I'm happy to. I feel like I'm connected to STEM entrepreneurship in a lot of different ways. So I spent the last 3 years of life building a technology platform with my co-founder Beth. Didn't know what I was literally doing. So that's why I did my lateral education at MIT and I joined Austin Women in Technology Design Community. I love mentoring young people, so I'm involved in STEM Views, which is a mentorship startup organization that came out of UC. And I love being connected to young people that are curious and all the great companies that are coming out of this movement of technology just advancing us. It's really incredible.
So for me, STEM has been kind of like this for my whole career. I actually started out as a biologist, so my undergrad degree is biology with a minor in chem, and so I worked in labs supporting students in science fairs, and that brought me into education as a science teacher and administrator. But the entrepreneurial part came in once I started to help different organizations through contract coaching, and so working with schools to help them do turnaround work, bring STEM and data analysis really deeply into work that they do to help transform student outcomes. And right now, the way it connects with what I'm doing is not only am I doing STEM and entrepreneurship at school, but I am an entrepreneurship. School is definitely a startup. I'm an entrepreneur. The school is definitely a startup. So having to use a lot of my design thinking skills every day to make really hard decisions to make sure that not only are we aligned with as a public charter school, but also really and making sure that we're creating a space for students who don't usually get access to really interdisciplinary entrepreneurship training for 6 through 12.
Yeah, so I am with MetroLab, and our organization teaches youth entrepreneurship. Our curriculum is the eSTEAM. So we teach STEAM, but through the entrepreneurial lens, teaching entrepreneurial mindsets to youth. Our founder, I am not a scientist. I didn't grow up with STEM, but the founder of our organization was a scientist. She was an engineer. She was an entrepreneur. She taught entrepreneurship both at UT Austin and at Trinity University. And it was then that she realized that there were not any women or girls in the STEM, in the entrepreneurship and in the STEM courses. And so that's why she founded MetroLab, and we teach these mindsets to youth and to girls and to youth historic marginalized communities to teach these because they are very important. And we're kind of talking about this a little earlier into this. Like I said, I've worked with a lot of founders. Not all of them had a STEM background, but I could definitely see the ones that did, and I could see how they approached the challenges a little bit differently and were a little more resilient. So, anyways, I'm probably stepping on to another question, but that's how I'm involved with it now.
Thank you, guys. It's really interesting to see the things you guys got diverse perspectives here. And we're going to come back to this. So hold on to that. We're definitely going to dive into it. So we've been talking about STEM, but Adrian and I have been talking. There's a lot of different things that STEM can do. So what does it mean in your world? Like, but like, what is it, and what does STEM entrepreneurship mean to you?
I'll start. For me, it's so cliche just to say this, but STEM to me is truly there's nothing that happens in the world around us without aspect of STEM and understanding. I mean, I had it use it makes our lives better. I think what STEM entrepreneurship is like truly using our world around us, our community, our relationships to solve problems, and to make the world a better place. And so that's what I always think about. I think STEM entrepreneurship, but then also really being able to empower folks. I think STEM needs access, right? If we are able to hone in on those critical thinking skills, hone in on those skills, and be able to apply them not only in our personal lives, but in all up in a way that provides us a totally different level of access. But I think a lot of people
And I think some of it comes down to like so much is changing so rapidly in our world today that everything is like STEM aspects of that touch everything. And especially as that changes and advances with AI and other areas of technology, like I'm very literal tech focused in the STEM bucket. My undergrad was neuroscience. I don't do stuff with science like that anymore. But it's just touching every aspect of our lives, and we're going to need such advanced thinking and curiosity. And how do we apply those things into our infrastructure, into our water, into, we were talking earlier about internet access and broadband access. And so it's everywhere, right? And we've got to empower the people that are going to make that change for our youth as we move forward in time.
Yes, to all that. We ditto to all of that, and especially in like co-signing on the access part of all of this, and how STEM is incredibly important to access and to equity, and to making sure that everybody is coming from the same playing field, the same, being able to start by understanding STEM, understanding entrepreneurial mindsets, opens doors and gives new opportunities. A lot of times, you know, when I first was brought into the whole ecosystem, I had no idea it existed. And I lived in Austin for 24 years. I didn't know about it. I didn't know that there was a place called Capital Factory. I didn't know what people did there. I didn't know that any of this existed. And I've lived there most of my life. The founder of Devink spent most of his career at Dell Technologies. He didn't know anything about it when he decided to start Devink. And so just the whole ability to have the access of what is happening and just opening those doors is so important. It's critical.
It's really interesting to see you guys focus on access and open doors. Because when I think about STEM, it's not STEM at this point in time, like it's also implemented. But in terms of opening doors, you have to have access. What kind of obstacles have you personally faced as an entrepreneur, or what challenges do you see for those you support in their entrepreneurial journeys, and how do you overcome those?
I can say a lot of things about this bucket. I feel like I'm going to say something that is commonly discussed. One of the most impactful things on my journey was fundraising for our technology platform, and 2 female founders going into a room with venture capitalists is honestly terrible. Like, I am a really bold person. I'll show up and talk to literally anyone about anything. I have no qualms with that. And going through that fundraising process, which we didn't actually have to execute on, which was great, was one of the most challenging things. And providing women and underrepresented founders the access to the funding that they need to make their STEM commercialized thing that they want to do come to life is so critical. And there are people that are working on that, but we have so much work to do to get access to funding. And we were talking about that a little bit, I think, related to like access to education, access to funding, access to all the things that you need to take that idea and make it come to fruition, whether you are a 3rd grader or you are somebody that's venturing on a new thing, is so important. And I have no idea how we get there other than to keep talking about it and getting women and underrepresented people that can drive that change to help us make that possible for the future generations. It's really passionate about this topic.
It's yes. Capital is probably, I don't know, access, capital, big barriers. Who you know is
Your social capital is so important. And most of the things that we receive is because somebody spoke for us. And so if you do not grow up with any connections or to know, then you don't have a network. And so what I have realized in my 53 years of life is that you need to know people. You need to know people. Somebody helped you get to where you are right now. And so you need to help people. And we have that, we've had that opportunity. And I think that there are lots of youth today that don't have that opportunity. They don't have the access to that.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with both of them. I think the bigger thing, too, to your point, is like showing up in spaces where you don't look like what people think you should. For certain titles, I've definitely experienced that being a woman in STEM, a woman of color in STEM, and always feeling like I have to come into rooms and like read off my resume really quick before I say that I'm a woman in STEM, and especially in the work of school founding in the state of Texas, and even making history. I am the first Black woman in the Austin region to found and lead a charter management organization. So definitely a feat, and having to show up to meetings and people, are on Zoom and are like, well, wait, but are you the superintendent? Are you the leader? And having to navigate that space and be able to advocate and make sure that we get what we need for our organization, even though I don't necessarily look like a lot of my peers who are doing this work every day. And I think also to their point about the obstacles as far as like access and social capital, I was fortunate to have many mentors who don't look like me, who look like the people that I go into the rooms with, who have trained me and taught me how to network and how to show up in spaces. But we have so many students who never get the opportunity to even hear about that type of work, especially even practice it. And so just being able to have organizations like theirs, like our school, that amplifies that and puts students kind of in that space to practice and learn those skills. Because if they don't, it really can get in the way of their livelihood once they are able to get out into the world.
So I'd like to share a quick anecdote about young people. So for Austin Women in Technology, our member base is like 30s to 50s, your mid-level career. We don't have a lot of students, right? But we show up at events at UT, and we actually just launched a partnership with Women Who Code at Texas State, which I'm really excited about. It is amazing to meet students. And I know that I'm speaking in the undergraduate and graduate space here, but they are so scared to like talk to us. And I'm just like, we're just people hanging out with you. That's how I approach a lot of things in life, is we're all just peopling around the world, talking to each other and helping each other be successful, but hopefully. And it's incredible how they're like, I am so scared to come to an AWT event because I don't know how to talk to people that are in executive positions or not, or in the professional world. And so we're really trying, if y'all have any anecdotes for me after this panel is over, I'd love feedback on how to get the youth more engaged in networking organizations, because it is so important when you go out into the world to form those connections and know how to do it and not be afraid to talk to people. And some of that comes with practice, but it's really interesting, and we're trying really hard to like break that barrier with some of the universities in town. So
right. Awesome. Well, I really liked hearing those anecdotes from you guys. And when you guys were talking about being a woman in STEM earlier, I saw a lot of shaking heads in the audience. But I'm curious, I know you spoke on it so far, but how has being a woman in STEM and STEM entrepreneurship changed, since you were starting out versus now? Like, are those same challenges still there, or have they improved? Should we be hopeful about it?
I just want to say that, yes, I think that I have learned a lot from younger people that I have worked with and I have crossed paths with, who have taught me things. I have learned that this movement of women helping women and supporting each other is new to me. That's not how I grew up. That wasn't how the culture was when I grew up. It was very competitive. If you had a woman in a C-suite, that she was very protective of that position, and she was threatened by any smart girls or women, young women coming up. And so I am very hopeful for the new generation. I believe that they believe in equity. It's very important. They're mission oriented. They're not afraid to say what's important to them, and they're kind of leading from the bottom and pushing things forward. So I have a lot of hope in our youth, and I wish I learned. And you hear that a lot when we teach Venture Lab and STEAM and the entrepreneurial mindsets. You hear a lot of people in Gen X like me that say, "I really wish I knew this when I was growing up." Yes, I think it is changing.
I'll second that. I think our ecosystem here in Austin is also really special. I think we have a lot of supportive organizations, and we're in a unique space of like flourishing innovation, and it allows for a lot of groups to cross-pollinate and collaborate. Like, I'm here because I know Kristen, and we're connected through, I don't even know what, a dinner or something that we had 2 years ago. Who knows? And so I think that I have a lot of hope for Austin, and there are cities that are looking at us to help commercialize even internationally, like Switzerland and biotech and some other things that are happening, coupling with Austin. So I think there's a bright horizon. We just have to keep that momentum going forward.
Yeah, I would agree, especially to piggyback off of what Monica said about the competition and how it wasn't a space where you could freely go to another woman and ask for advice or, just try to figure it out. But I am very hopeful, and I do see a change. I also think that I'm hopeful to see how we can amplify the change, right? And create more access, because I notice in the ecosystem that if you know the people and if you know how to get access to the events or to the resources, it can be very transformative. But some people just don't seem to have that access, especially thinking about like our more rural areas around Austin, and how things are happening 15 minutes away from them, and sometimes they have no clue and are not tapped in. I think to Emily's point earlier about making sure that we are sharing the great word of STEM widely, and making sure that everyone is able to get access to that. But definitely agree with these ladies.
Awesome. Okay, so something I'm curious about then. So Monica, you've been talking about it's all about who you know, and Shonqualla, you've been saying it's about access, and also what's really helped you is having a mentor that looked like you and could guide you through the process. So I had a question about who's been your key mentor or role model in this journey that you've had, and how have they influenced your approach to STEM entrepreneurship, or what kind of mentorship experience you've stepped forward with from where you guys are at?
So for me, it's actually been the opposite. A lot of my mentors have been white males. And I think one of the best things that could have ever happened to me was in undergrad, I needed one more science credit. And I was in a space where our school didn't have any more science classes available during times that I had available. And one of my professors made up a class for me. And I was the only student that could sign up for it. And I know, right? It was pretty crazy. I was the only student that could sign up for it. And basically what I had to do was show up to his office twice a week to talk to him about what I was going to do once I graduated. And the one thing that he told me at the end of our meetings when I was coming up on my graduation was, I want you to walk into every room and talk to every white man that you see the same way you've talked to me over these weeks. And I want you to walk into every room with the same confidence as a white man. And I think it was some of the best advice I've ever gotten, because it's given me the confidence to network and to be okay if I go and reach out to people who don't look like me and they tell me no. And they don't want to talk to me, and not be crushed and not try it again. And that has really helped propel my career, and just even my personal growth and confidence as a leader and entrepreneur, being able to talk to people and be in spaces with folks who didn't grow up like me and have different perspectives, but are willing to help me grow.
Gosh, I have so many examples of really impactful people in my life. I think most recently, Beth, who is my CEO, I moved to Austin. I left Houston, and had never really had such an empowering boss. And she is such a boss lady, and she is such a champion of equity. And she was like, you go do the community thing that you want to do. You go find your space that's yours. Like, you're going to do this cool thing for us. Great. And just championed all the time, and champions for equity and equal access, and has just been such an inspiration to me. And I've gravitated so hard to that. And going through building our technology platform together and stuff, it was just having that champion there and championing each other that we can make it happen and come to life. We're in revenue. We have customers. Like, I wake up every day and I'm like, wow, I can't believe we did that. It's amazing. And so I feel very lucky in my professional career to have that, because I think I've had a very nonlinear path, like exiting hard science really early and going into the healthcare space and then more of the business side. But it's really having a lot of allies and people that tell you you can go do the thing, and making you really believe in yourself. So
I've had 3 pivotal key mentors in my career. 2 were Latinas, older than me, and 1 was a Black man. But all 3 always saw more in me than I saw in myself, and always challenged me as a coach, and was there for me when I would fall down, and would tell things to me. It would be truthful with me because they wanted to help me. And like I said, they saw the potential in me before I could see it in myself. And so that is something that I carry when I mentor people that come looking for advice from me. I try to pay it forward, because that's why I'm sitting here today, is because of people that believed in me. Yeah.
That's so special. That was really touching. Thank you for sharing, you guys. All right, so looking forward then, looking at the bigger picture of equipping the next generation with STEM skills, entrepreneur skills. One of the goals of the Greater Austin STEM ecosystem is to ensure that everyone, educators, families, communities, they all have the tools to build STEM skills. So in your view, is it important to include STEM entrepreneurship in this vision?
my vote is yes.
And why, I guess, is the follow-up.
Natural follow-up. I think people go on a lot of different career paths, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, the 3 of us together. Like I've mentored people that are in the PhD programs at UT and stuff, and they're so laser focused on science, and like science is all the things, right? And they're the groups that help commercialize technology coming out of the university and stuff like that. They've either got to have a founder who is in the STEM space that has a great business acumen to then go fundraise and do all the things that you need to do to commercialize that technology, or you've got to couple them with somebody who can support that, right? Whether that's through a venture studio and they find somebody or whatever that looks like. And so I think being able to help STEM focused students understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur, what it's like to go out into the corporate world and experience that for whatever you're founding and wanting to commercialize or grow into a business is really important. Because being in the corporate and the business environment is very different than being in a lab and being in a setting that is more academically focused. And it can be like a radical personnel human being change to have those interactions and have to balance the business side. And communicating with your coworkers is probably really different and all that. So I think it's really important to teach both sides of the coin. And as we grow into more technology and STEM-centric businesses, like that's going to be so much of what comes out of, I think, the younger generation as they get more embedded in technology. Can't wait to see what it's like 40 years from now. We're going to be the Matrix, maybe. Y'all having a good time?
Yes. Yes, I do believe that entrepreneurship, the mindsets of entrepreneurship, and that's one thing with Venture Lab. We are not trying to make third graders quit school and go start their own business. That's not what we're trying to do. What we want to do is we want to teach the entrepreneurial mindsets to these children, so that especially girls and underrepresented communities are learning how to embrace failure, because that is going to help you succeed, and that you learn how to be courageous, that you have curiosity. Curiosity is so important, which are in the STEM fields. But I think through the entrepreneurial lens, it'll make you successful no matter what you decide to do, whether you decide to open a business later in life or you decide to go work for somebody or do something else. Those are life skills that'll help you no matter what you decide to do.
I'm very passionate about constant curiosity and learning, clearly. So I agree.
Yes, I definitely second, third that, because I think it's really important that we teach people how to be the CEOs of their own life. And this is something we were talking about earlier, regardless of what they want to do, if they want to work for an organization or open their own, but really understanding and having the deep skill sets of how to critically think, how to use design thinking, and how to solve their own problems. And then also be able to solve problems of the organizations that they work with and work for. And I think another really big thing is that you really can't have entrepreneurship without STEM, right? Entrepreneurship is truly design thinking. And if you're doing it right and you're doing it well, you're going to have a lot of STEM a part of that process. And then I also think about that upward mobility and that intergenerational mobility. And so how do we create opportunities to not only expose our young people to these skills and assets with STEM and entrepreneurship, but how do we then go back and give it to their parents and their families? Because once they get to a certain level, I know that's something for me as a first generation student, my parents didn't even graduate high school. And so it's been a whirlwind for them to try to understand my life now. And so making sure that we are able to give some of that access to the parents as well, so that they're not unintentionally asking our young people not to go for these things that are really great just because it's new to them and it's scary. And so I echo a lot of what they say, but we have to have STEM and entrepreneurship. That is the future of our world. And if you don't have those skills, it's going to be really difficult.
Awesome. So we've discussed all of your challenges, your successes, and why it's important to have STEM entrepreneurship. But if you could speak to what inspires you to continue doing STEM entrepreneurship things, what is your why? What is the meaning behind it for you?
I'll go. One thing that I haven't shared a ton through this process of school founding is what one of my biggest inspirations were to start this work. And it was the brilliance that young people have naturally in critical thinking and STEM that they don't even know. And so one of my students was a huge inspiration for Unparalleled Preparatory Academy, and his name was Trey. And Trey was one of those kids that got kicked out of every school that he could possibly go into because of behavior, and just kind of not being understood, but just a natural critical thinker. Loved to create, loved to innovate, and just was often misunderstood. And unfortunately, that led him down a path that eventually ended his life, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and being gunned down due to gun violence. But he's a huge inspiration to students like him, because I think that so often, I think we were talking about this earlier, is that our young people and our families in general think that STEM is for a certain type of person, right? You have to look a certain way, you have to be in a certain space, but understanding that it is a naturally occurring thing, and how do we help people bring that magic and that brilliance to the forefront so that they can use it for their betterment. And so that's one of my biggest inspirations is him, and then just making sure that students like him are able to make a shift in time.
Thank you for sharing that.
What was the question?
What is your why, basically? What inspires you to keep going?
Oh man. You know, I'm a curiosity person. I'm a learner. So for me personally, like constant curiosity and what's the next thing that's going to make our society transform is really interesting to me. You know, if I think about the young people also setting some of the world up for success for the youth that are coming out of tiny children to adults, and what that looks like, and how can I help make sure that the world is a wonderful place for them. I think that's part of what inspires me and drives me. Yeah.
So for me, I am Mexican American. I second generation Mexican American. Most of my family have dark brown skin. My brother and I, you know, when we were born, everybody looked at my mom and was like, what? But I say that because a cousin of mine, Adriana, and I grew up, we were both born in 1971. We went to the same schools. She had brown skin, and she's wicked smart, and I wasn't. But I had a much easier time with school, only because of that. And we were first cousins, and we had homeroom together in 6th grade. And I remember she was always making people laugh, and she was doing something, and she got in trouble, and I stood up for her, and our Miss Newcomb said, Monica, why is it every time that I reprimand Adriana, you have to defend her? And I said, because she's my cousin. And she looked at her, and she said, well, if she's your cousin, then you must be adopted. And so I went home and I asked my dad, like, am I adopted? And all of this is to say is that I don't look like your typical Mexican American, but I am, and it's my family. And I have seen firsthand how different the life is by just how you look. And so why I get up in the morning and why I do this work and why it's important to me is because I know that. And it's not right. And we should all strive for equity. So that's why I can do this.
I feel like I need a clap after all three of those answers. Y'all don't have to clap with me if you don't want to. I feel like I needed to. Thank you guys for sharing your stories. They're inspiring, and your anecdotes. I mean, it brings a lot of meaning to the things you're saying. Like there's just like that universal truth behind it, but hearing it with your lived experiences is really special. So my final question before we open it up for Q&A is, what is one piece of practical advice you would give someone who's interested in starting out in STEM entrepreneurship, whether that's a student or maybe someone out here is like, you know what, maybe I want to do STEM entrepreneurship?
I'll take this one first. I would say find community. I'm a big, passionate community person. Find your network, find your space. That's going to change over time. But surround yourself with people who, will support and encourage you on your journey. It exists out there. You just got to go find who it is.
Okay, so I would encourage them to your point, do research if they can, to find out what programs are available to them. And if they can't, I would tell them all about ours. But yes, I mean, and realistically to find out, because to Sean's point, like there are so many things that are out there that people just don't even know exist. So just letting them know that it's there, that's there for them, is the most important thing, and helping make that connection.
Yeah, I echo both, and I would say do it scared. This is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. to stand in front of the State Board of Education and say, like, we need a STEM school. I think do it scared, and there are people who will rally around you, and they may be scared too, and you will do it scared together. So I would just say do it scared.
I love that. Thank you guys so much. One more round of applause. Yay. And now we're gonna open it up for questions. So thank you guys for joining us. Now's your time to ask them all their deep, dark secrets, for advice, for recommendations for restaurants. I don't know.
Don't be shy.
And this is maybe targeted more to Sean and Monica, who work really closely with K-12 students. I'm curious if y'all could talk a little bit more about when you are seeing your students engaging in STEM entrepreneurship, like what about that is exciting and inspiring? Like what are you all seeing when you're seeing these students really engaging in STEM entrepreneurship?
For me, it is all the little light bulbs going off, and then seeing the confidence once they get to the space where they feel confident. And so, an example, we did a pilot program for our school a couple summers back where we had all underserved students coming together and just trying out our model to see if the community wanted it and if they liked it. And for the first, it was a 6-week program. For the first 2.5 weeks, kids did not know what to do. Because in school, what are you usually told to do? Sit down, be quiet, do your worksheets, read. And we were asking them to build, put it together, engineer. And so we had to start throwing just at them little small engineering design projects to get them comfortable with the idea of just jumping in. But once they got over that hurdle and that obstacle, oh my goodness, the amazing things that they created. And at our showcase, we had funders and big time executives. I'm talking Boys and Girls Club CEO and things like that. And one of the execs said, it was 3rd through 6th graders present better than some adults that I've seen. And that was just after, that 6 weeks of really deeply working with them. And so I just think the amazing thing is seeing that confidence shift and then being able to show up for themselves.
Exactly. The confidence. That's what you hear and you see over and over again. And not just with the kids, because we also teach the educators, because it starts with the educators, right? So the educators has the mindset, I'm not an entrepreneur. I can't teach entrepreneurship. I don't know anything about entrepreneurship. No, you are an entrepreneur. You're an educator. You have to be resilient. You are actually have a lot of the skills and the mindsets already because of the job that you do and how you do it. And it's just like, we teach the entrepreneurial mindsets to the educators and they teach it to their students. But the stories that you'll hear over and over and over again is that these children came in not knowing, and sometimes the educators are like, this is the first time I'm doing this. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm failing too. We're going to do this together. We're going to fail together. And then when they finish the program, the level of confidence in the students, and that's why this is so important, because it's that confidence that gets a child from thinking, I can actually come up with a solution and I can actually make something of it, and people listen to me. I'm important. I mean something, like I have value. And that's the shift that happens.
This makes me so inspired for our young people.
But it was picking up the captioning, so I thought maybe the microphone was picking it up.
I don't want to leave you hanging, Angela.
Thank you.
So several of you mentioned that you didn't know anything about STEM. At what point did you find out about STEM? And why do you think nobody knows about it? Or why did you think it took you so long to hear about it or find out about it? The question I'm asking is, how do we fix that? Because I started in STEM in 1984. There was no E then. And it's the same issue we run into today. So I just want to see what your answers are.
I feel
about
like
that.
awareness and education. I mean, and I'm trying to think about this.
Well, I think part of it is, especially, again, y'all have already heard how old I am. So a lot of women would self-select themselves out of STEM. So I'm not good at math. I'm not good at science. Like, I'm telling myself these things, right? And so that, to me, was just never an option, because that's how I felt. It wasn't until I got into this, especially going through the entrepreneurship programs, you're applying STEM without even knowing that it's STEM. And once you're participating in a program where you're actually applying and utilizing and doing STEM, not knowing it, and then somebody says, what you're doing right now, that's design thinking. What you're doing right now is STEM. And then they're like, oh, then I can do STEM. I am good at this, right? So it's, what is it? It's a I mean, but how do you change that, right? Is what you're saying. Is what the question is, how do you change it?
I think some of it goes to like also helping people believe in themselves or helping them realize that they can go do that. I've had a lot of, I was very lucky. My parents were like, cool, you can go do whatever you want. I've got a lot of friends who did not have that luxury, my mother included. My mother and my aunt were told by my grandparents, you can only be a nurse or a teacher. Literally, one is a nurse and my mom was a teacher, and she should have been like a math wizard, rocket scientist. But like, and it was because she was told she couldn't do it. And we've even got people like on our AWT board who were like told they couldn't do this thing in technology or science or business or whatever. And so I think it's championing for the people that are in your life who want to explore that as an opportunity and encouraging them to do it, or giving them the resources or the connection. And that's where I'm so passionate about community, and giving people access to what you have access to that they might not, or introducing them to that person that's going to change their life and expose them to what they need to go make that flourish for them.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say really quick. I think it's vocabulary, right? Understanding that you may be doing STEM, kids may be doing STEM in school, but nobody's putting that vocabulary to it. So naming it, and then also the exposure piece. For me, I didn't fall in love with STEM until I got to college because I was in a school that didn't really value it. So I think also figuring out ways to make it a part of everything and not a way that people can self-select out.
Can I do a quick follow-up? The reason I asked that is the number one goal of STEM in 1989 was to expose more women and underrepresented populations to science, technology, and mathematics. Again, the E didn't come into play until early 2000s. The problem we have today is the same problem that we had 35 years ago, is early engagement. We're waiting as a society 8 years before we're exposing any students to science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And I think the overall goal should be, of everyone in this room, is to expose everyone to STEM as early as possible. Pre-K, elementary. We had conversations with it this morning. The elementary schools are responsible for feeding the junior highs into, when they get into high school, to be selecting career paths that they want to go down to. But if we're not exposing young people to STEM, we're not only missing the women and underrepresented population, we're missing everyone. And I think that's the main key, because I don't think anyone in this room that's ever done a STEM activity has had an issue with active engagement. I think everyone that tries STEM at any level is actively engaged in it and wants more of it. The question is, how do we get it to everyone sooner and not tell them it's science or it's math and you can't do this? We need to make it fun for everyone so that it's a game to them when they start and it's not intimidating. So you have the confidence that you talked about by the time you get into junior high and high school, and you can make more effective decisions about the future.
I am curious how technology, like, I would love to know, because I don't have children myself. I would love to know what y'all think about, is technology advancement and like AR integration and things like that. Like, what do y'all see for the future of our young people and their exposure to that? Because if we're using technology devices and other things like that earlier and earlier, like kids have cell phones. I didn't have a cell phone until I was in high school, maybe. I can't remember. But now I've got cousins that are 5 or whatever, and they're holding iPad devices constantly. So I feel like by that nature, they're sort of getting exposed. I know it's different.
Using iPad at 4 months old.
Like, so
Using every finger and her toes to engage.
I mean, it's
with it.
going to
She
be
was
so different.
Speaking and reading in Spanish and English by 2 years old at the 2nd grade reading level. She started coding at 6 and became a certified game developer at 7. None of this was forced on her. She was doing an iPad.
It's like technology nativeness because
But
I mean
how do we get
they're
that to
developing and
everybody?
growing.
Obviously, I believe in STEM, so my child's going to have access to
Yeah.
it. How do we get that exposure to all students?
Professional session starts in January.
Yep, sure does. League of Women Voters,
And I
come
was
talk to
gonna
me if you
say
want to help out.
standards, and I think they're doing that.
Ish. I mean, yes.
Yes, yeah.
People have to do them now.
Getting teachers to think in a new way, like, not teaching subjects in silos. I was a little confused when you all mentioned STEM, because they did teach science. You're talking about teaching it in an integrated way where the focus is more, hands-on learning and stuff. Is that what you mean by STEM?
Well, when I taught, I used to I taught technology here in Texas and a lifetime teaching certificate. They don't give those out anymore. But I told my students, I said, this isn't a typical class when I was implementing technology. It's like, we don't just do math today. In real life, you don't just go do math one day, and the next day you don't just go do English or talk to people, and the next day you don't just go do science. You have to learn how to do everything in this class, and we're just going to use technology to advance it faster.
Yeah.
And I think that's the approach that maybe we need to look at in education, is not be so one-sided in teaching certain subjects, be more inclusive in how we open it up to all the learning styles.
Yeah.
And all the personalities and all the traits and all the populations. You had a question. I keep interrupting. I'm sorry.
It was not so much a question as a comment. So what we see in the science fair world is that at the elementary level, kids do fun projects. They want to do something and they do it, and nobody really much mentions the word STEM. They just want to see what happens to that penny if they drop it into Coke or 7-Up or what have you, or what food their dog prefers. They're just naturally curious. And then what we see when they reach middle school, exactly what you guys all said, they start self-selecting. And part of it is because STEM is a big word. And it's something that others do. It's something that students who are from different backgrounds do. So, and it's also something that mostly boys do. So one reason why we do elementary fair is that we want the kids to get accustomed to just play and try this, and then hope that in middle school, they still have the same element of curiosity to where it's not such a big deal. I'm doing STEM. It's more like I have a question. I can find out the answer if I try this. And exactly what you said, they get the self-confidence. If they do a project that is very, very simple, but they successfully complete it, and they can then talk to an adult that they don't know, which is huge for middle schoolers. It's actually huge for even bigger for elementary. They can talk to an adult who appreciates what they have done. Well, then we can encourage them to continue. It's a process.
Other questions? Comments, concerns?
I'll get the mic later soon. Whoever else has questions.
I wanted to know, what grade levels is your school?
Thank you so much for asking that. To your point, it's 6 through 12. So we're starting with 6th and 7th. So if you know anyone looking for a great middle school that does interdisciplinary learning, let them know about Unparalleled Prep. Will be in Northeast Austin. But to that point, I think it's also creating proof points, right? And so that's another reason why I'm doing this work, is because I've been told for so long, even when I was a science educator, that it can't happen. It has to be in silos. We can't do interdisciplinary. And as a biology teacher, I had to do interdisciplinary because biology is math, science, history, reading all the time. You can't pass the test if you don't do it all. And so being able to have moments like the science fair and other things to create those proof points to show people, hey, it actually can happen. And now that you see it can happen, let me help you figure out how to do it in your space.
All right. So first, I'll just say that part of my job is, part of my job is to actually help bring STEM mindsets to teachers, teach teachers about STEM mindsets and how to use these things in the classroom. And we talked about like how, Joe, you brought up, how do we make it happen and how do we make it happen earlier? And my opinion on this is it's money. So I'm going to look at Emily because not because you have the money, but because I feel like I guess my perception is you live more than the other people that I know in this room in possibly corporate circles. You talked about, helping people learn how to go and talk to people in a corporate environment. And you mentioned also when we were talking about the Austin ecosystem. And I will tell you from my vantage point, when I talk to people at the other service centers around the state, what the result of our conversation often is when we talk about STEM is that Austin lacks STEM in the K-12 space. Like we are way behind the Dallas area. We're way behind the Houston area. We're way behind the Valley, like as far as STEM being a priority in K-12. And so my personal job, I identify as a STEM specialist, even though it's technically only 20% of my job, but that's just like my identity. Like that's what I'm passionate about. And so I haven't yet figured it out, but I think the answer is money. So I'm just kind of putting it out there, not as a question to be answered, but just as a thing to think about. Like you talked about the legislative session coming up. We have lots of great people that advocate for funding for STEM initiatives, but what's really cool to me is that there's so many resources out there. There are companies, there are people that are people in this room, passionate people, right? We have all the resources, but what happens when we get to the classroom is they don't have the time, they don't have the money, and especially because they don't have the money, it gets degraded on the priority list. And so just putting it out there as far as if that's one pain point, what do we do? Yeah.
Adrian, I'm just curious, in the other areas where they do make STEM a priority and it is getting implemented, because I'm shocked. Number one, I'm shocked. Do you know what they're doing? Do you know, can you look at one that's doing it well and see?
It's hard to pinpoint. I do notice that they do have they do get corporate sponsorships. I've tried to reach out personally, and I know all of the things can be done. It's about who do you know and how do you get in front of them? But a lot of them do have corporate partnerships, but they also just have this culture of valuing STEM that I don't know how they got there, right? They'll tell me the things that their campuses prioritize and that their campuses are doing. I'm shocked, right? Because I'm also always very empathetic with campus, administrators, people that work in schools. They're so overwhelmed. They're so overworked. They have so many things on their plate, right? So it's not I want to look at them and be why aren't you doing this thing that's so important? But, so I don't know, but that's a couple of things. Yeah.
Can I mention something that I found? Because I travel the state often, and I work with all the regional service centers. What I found is that on STEM days, when there's a specific STEM day, if you want to help them with it.
Yeah, it's better.
Okay.
But then you have to give it us.
Okay, can you pick that up? I was saying I traveled the state to go to all the educational service centers, and what I found is in the elementary schools that have a designated STEM day, the attendance is almost 100%. The attendance for STEM day. So the kids want this. And you talked about being passionate, whether you're a passionate administrator or even just a passionate teacher. If you have quality STEM being allowed to happen in your school, it retains the teacher as well. And that's a huge issue, is teacher retention. But when you got cool stuff and everybody wants what you got, it keeps the teacher there. So I think administrators need to understand that as well. If you build it, it will come and they will stay. And just look at all the cool stuff that anyone's been exposed to in STEM, and everybody wants more of it. And that's like the highlight. We want more of that. We want to participate in that. And the research is out there. Kids come to school more often because they want to participate.
Yeah, and I think to that point, the parents want it too. And that's something that we've really been hearing in the landscape of parents wanting their kids to have these experiences and this access. And I also think it's about not just making sure that we have the money. The money is important, but I think prioritization, right? How are we using the money? What are we spending it on? And how are we being innovative and crafty when we are pushing STEM? And so one of my roles that I used to do, I used to go to DC every year with Society for Science in the Public. And one of the things that I did was mentor educators across Texas in science, and specifically, how do you have science access in Title I in low income areas? It's absolutely possible. It can absolutely happen, but it takes some creativity. And so I think prioritization is super important in figuring out, how do we get people who are comfortable to come into the spaces where people aren't, and help them figure it out and make those decisions.
You mentioned parent engagement. Do you have like STEM family nights where you invite the parents to come and participate with the students?
Yeah, but I think one of the big things is like not calling it that. How do you have a barbecue or a block party or something like that, and then they just so happen to be doing engineering design projects once they get there? I think is really important. And then also giving them the vocabulary when they come, so that they're comfortable in knowing, like, oh, I showed up for this barbecue. I did this engineering design thing with my kid. We were successful. I can do STEM, versus like putting it out there STEM, and they're probably not going to show up because they've already made up in their mind that it's not for them and their child. And I think the other thing is bringing the community and the families along the journey of building the thing, right? So one thing that really helped our school be really transformative in the process of getting approved, which I don't know if you guys know the stakes of getting charters approved in the state of Texas, but it's definitely not an easy thing. Very, very difficult. And one of the things that helped us stand out is that we did this through a community co-design model. And so what that means is we took community members, 5 community members from across the Austin region, who helped us build community with families, and our families came together and made the Unparalleled Preparatory Academy model. They told us what that was missing. They told us what they wanted. They sat in focus groups. They did surveys. They came to the showcases and gave feedback. And that's what we used to build the model, and still right now working on getting information from parents as we are in our founding stage.
So I have a question for you. Are you plugged into Code to College? Do you know who they are?
I do.
Because they do programming for high school students in underrepresented schools here in Austin, and partner with a lot of the corporations. Like, I know Matt Stevenson is their executive director. And I remember going to Cirrus Logic. We supplied some volunteers from AWT, and the kids were there with people, whether from Cirrus Logic or wherever, mentors from the community, building, I don't know, things on the table, semiconductor stuff, like whatever. And getting that involvement from the community, from the corporate level, and then getting the students engaged on like a Saturday to go hang out and do that. And they recruit heavily for corporate people to come in and help educate the students. And so there are programs around. I am super curious though, like, I think about Dallas, and I know there's a lot of work on like autonomous vehicles in Dallas and some other things. And, Dallas has dollars, right? They're a big finance heavy city. And so I don't know. I'm going to go down a really deep rabbit hole later and read about this today.
To that point of corporations going into schools, I run into this quite a lot when I talk to corporations about funding. and invariably somebody will say, we can go to a school of your choice and we can do a day off. And I think that's all very wonderful, but I think what Austin and many other communities are missing is a continuous STEM education. These one-offs are very nice on the day that they happen, but it's something extraordinary. And what we need is like ordinary focus, ongoing with the funding.
Yes.
And the other thing, I'm just saying this, I mean, the science fair, we have funding from a very nice donor who now gives us stipends for Title I student teachers and Title I schools for supplies. It is absolutely disgraceful that teachers have to pay for supplies if their students have the initiative to do a science fair project. The Manor School District wants to participate for the first time again since 2011 this year, and they told us they have 60 students, but they can only send 10 because that's all the funding they have. And the project fee is $25 a student, and they're telling us that the Manor School District cannot find the funding. And the thing is, we'll let them in for free if we have to. That's not the point. But the point is that the Manor School District told them they can only afford to pay for 10 students to go to the science fair. And, okay, I'm going on a rant. I am sure they have money to fund their football team, right? Or their marching band? I mean, where are the priorities? Okay, sorry, I'm done.
Yeah, thank y'all. I just want to be respectful of people's times. It is 5:56. So thank you guys. Thank you so much. You guys have been wonderful. Are we okay to like stay in here an extra moment? Like if people want to talk one-on-one with a certain person, because it seems like there are some conversations to be had. But I also know some people have to go. Yes. But thank you guys so much.